In this video, we're going to look at trim path. It's a pretty cool way to play with strokes and to actually animate the stroke, or the actual path, if you will. So here I have a few. I'm just going to play through them and I'll show you how to make them. They're pretty simple, but they're actually pretty effective depending on what you want to do with them. So we're going to look at each individual one and see kind of how we build that. And there we go. Cool. Okay, so what I have here, I have a few options. And let's start with just making a simple line. So I'm going to shut all these off. So I'm going to start fresh. And what I have here, I'm just going to click a line. I'm going to click my pen tool. I'm going to click from here to here. That's it. There's my path, and what I can do, it already has a stroke on it by default, or not by default, but the stroke I had initially set up. So I can go to that. I'm just going to name it line. And I'm going to twirl it down to take a look at what it actually is, what makes up this line. So I'll go to contents and I'll twirl down shape 1, and I see, yes, there is no fill, and currently I don't want to fill on this. I just want to play with the path. I want to play around with the stroke. So stroke 1, so let's see what's made up of. The color is red, correct. I can change any color I want. The opacity, I can change the opacity, I can change the stroke width and see how that works. So how the stroke actually ends up being presented first is what we can animate. Now we could also change up the animation and see we change the character, animate the character of the stroke, but here I'm just looking to do a trim path, which you'll see in just a little bit. So I'm just going to play around and, make it a round cap and make it a round join. Not that I even have a join on there, just a round cap for now. I could add dashes, taper, wave. I'll do that a little bit later. So that's kind of it. I'm just going to make this one line. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see a little bit better. And what I have here, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to make the line appear and then disappear, but it's going to kind of appear in a very specific way. So let's look at that. To add a trim path, so to add this animation, I'm going to go to my add by contents, and I'm going to click on trim paths. And that's it. It shows up here, trim paths. So what I can do, it allows me to do a start animation, an end animation, or offset animation. Well, let's look at one of those do. So my start animation, more or less, if I scrub through, it's going to show me exactly what it does. So I'm going to scrub, and I see what it does. That's the animation. All right. It goes from there to there. Beautiful. Let's do an end animation. So what does it do? It goes from the other side to this side. Okay, cool. And an offset animation allows me to offset the line and where it starts to animate from. So I'm going to move that. Well, right now it's not doing anything. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move these around and move this around, and now I can see what that offset does. Okay, so I can kind of animate it that way, which is pretty cool. So let me undo all those and let me just start fresh. So here I am at start. So I'm going to start, click on my stopwatch for start. I'm going to move it over. And I have my one keyframe down already. Now this one is going to be 100%. So let's see what that animation does. Okay, just disappears. Great. So that was a quick animation, mind you, but that's what that animation does. It just does that. Great. Let me kill that. Click on that stopwatch. I'm going to click on the end stopwatch. I have one set up already there. Didn't want that. Okay, I'm going to end right here, 100%, and I'm going to move it over here. And now this is going to bring it down to 0%, and now that is my end animation. Now, depending on how you want the line to show up, it's entirely up to you. Now, with this simple animation, there's actually quite a bit we can do with it. So some of the animations you saw earlier. So I'm going to move it in the middle roughly and just change the offset and just see what that does. All right, we can play around with that. So let me actually play with the offset. Let me get rid of those. I'm going to play with the offset. I'm going to animate it. No, I'm going to animate it at start at 0. I'm going to animate it here. But first, what I want to do, I want to move my end, maybe say here. And that's all I need to do. I could leave my start where it is. So I'm going to animate the offset, say there. And then I'm going to bring it over here and just move it. Kind of animate it right back to there again, let's just say. And there's my offset animation. And that's kind of it. Now you might be looking at it and kind of like, okay, well, the animation just stops there. Obviously, I could stretch out the keyframe and make it do a little bit more, or a little bit slower, quite frankly. Or I can go back to this keyframe, hold on shift and snap to it, and I can just move it a little bit further. Now remember, it is on a rotation, so that is at degrees, so it only goes up to 360, but I could also change up my full 360 degree, let's say 3 times, and I'll bring this down to 0. And it just kind of goes, sorry, I'm glitching out here a little bit. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, that's it. So it kind of just does that, which is great. Now you might say, I kind of want that animation to keep on going. I don't want it to stop here, but I still want it to keep going, but I want other things to happen here. Well, there's a quick expression we can add to this. It's very simple, and depending on how you have your animation set out, it could be seamless, and if you have your animation set up another way, it might not be seamless. However, I just want at least to show you that. If I hold down Option or Alt on a PC, I'm going to hold down Option, and if I click on the stopwatch with holding Option, it opens up my expression tab. Now you're kind of look at this like, what's this all about? It's okay, it's very simple. There's a few options we have here, but that's all I really want to look at as this open area that just happened here. So I'm just going to click on that. I'm going to press enter so I don't disrupt this code. I'm just going to type in loop. And when I type in loop, this shows up, and I'm just going to click on loop out, or double click on loop out, and that's all I need. So now when I go back, I'm just going to click, and the animation will continue on even though it passed its keyframe. It's just going to loop out. It's going to loop that animation continuously. Once again, it's going really, really fast, so it's tough to see. So let me even slow that down a little bit. Let me bring this back. And it's going to slow it down, but it's still going to loop it out. But now it's just going to go a little bit slower. And I can see if it happens to be seamless, which it kind of seems to be seamless. It just isn't seamless at the end over here, which is okay. So that is kind of one way we could play around with the trim path, which is pretty cool. But that's kind of the basics of it, which is very simple. So let's kind of continue on. Let's make something else here. So I'm going to make a shape. I'm going to make sure nothing is selected. I'm just going to click a rectangle very simply. Let me change it up just a little bit. So I'm going to click on, I'm going to be, this one I'm going to make a dashed line. So sorry, let me click on that and call it dash. Okay, so I'm going to click on my twirl here. I'm going to twirl it down, and let's take a look at what we can do here. So contents, once again, the rectangle one, yeah, that's what I have, a stroke, sure. So let's look at something a little bit different here. Let's bring down the stroke width a little bit, sure. Let's change up the color, why not? To anything, it doesn't really matter, that's fine. Butt cap doesn't matter because it's all, but now I can actually use my round join, and now it's going to actually have a rounded corner like that. That's what the round join does, the line join. Now the dash. So how does this work? Now we are familiar with Illustrator and InDesign and how we can add dashed lines pretty simply. Well, here it's kind of similar, but we just have ultimate control over the dash and the gap, which we have control over in Illustrator and InDesign as well. So I'm just going to press on the plus sign, and that's it. It shows me the dash, and it already shows up here. So what I could do, I could just scrub through. And now once again, if you really keep in mind, this could be an animation as well, just moving the dash, which is kind of cool, but I'm not going to do that. What I will do now, just to make it a little bit more interesting, round cap and round join. All right, good. So now I have that kind of looking thing. And once again, I could still move it out. And there I go, depending on how much I want. So once again, I could animate this using the trim path. I could also animate it using the offset. So if I just animated the offset, let's try that. So I'm going to go back there. I'm going to set up my offset to be 0. I'm going to move it over. Let's go a little bit further. And here I'm going to check my offset. But what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to line some things up. So this one here is lined up. So let's move it, and I'm going to make this line connect almost with this line, exactly where it is. Now I'm sure there's a better way to do this, but I'm just going to kind of offset it there and say roughly about there. Okay, good. Done. There's my animation. Now it's going to go very slow, obviously, which is great. And what I can do, once again, hold on Option, click, or Alt, click on that stopwatch. It's already active. Add my expression, loop, double click on loop out, and that's it. And let's see if it becomes a seamless. Yeah. Nice and easy, and it'll just keep going. I could extend obviously my composition time, but that's kind of it. That's how we could kind of make that seamless, or we can make it much quicker. Oh, both are selected. We'll make it much quicker. The loop out still stays the same. The expression still stays the same, which is great. Now it's much quicker, and it still loops, and that's one way to kind of create an interesting trim path, or a dash line motion there, which works out pretty cool. Now another way we could play around with strokes in general, as I've shown before, we can have, let's make a circle, and I'm just going to hold down my shape tool and bring up my ellipse. Nothing is, I'll make sure nothing is selected. I'm just going to drag out a circle. There we go. And for this one, doesn't really matter. I'm just going to, so once again, that last one wasn't actually a trim path, but we could obviously have added a trim path to it and had it animate that way as well. But this was just an offset, just playing with the dash. Maybe I'll go back to that and show you what we can do with the trim path on that one. So what I have here, I just have this stroke. Once again, here's my shape layer. I'm just going to call this a circle. Okay, and I'm going to look at my ellipse. There it is, because it's an ellipse, correct? It's a circle. It's a perfect circle, so that works. So I'm just going to change up my stroke. So what can we do with the stroke? Once again, doesn't really matter, just playing around. But this time I'm going to do a little bit of a taper. So this was actually going to show me what a trim path can do with my taper. So I'm just going to taper it like that. That's all, nice and simple. I could play around with the end length. I could kind of play with that taper a little bit more if I wanted to. I'm just playing around. Once again, let's go with a round cap. So it kind of has the rounded, it went with it. And let's do a round join. And play around with that. Let's see what that does. That didn't actually do anything, but that's okay. We're going to continue to play around and see what that does. So let's look what a start width does. Okay, the start width changes it. The end width, nothing, because my start line is already at 100%. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So what I can do now with this, I'm going to add a trim path again. Add trim paths, and here comes my trim path. And now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to kind of have it go around itself. So I'm going to do a start, and once again, if I just scrub the start, that is the animation. That's it. That's the animation. Oh, maybe right there I want to do that. I see why that happened. Okay, cool. So now this is going to be my animation. So I can also move around here. There we go. So I'm going to do an end animation. I'm going to start with nothing, and then I'm going to animate it that way. So let me start here, and I'll do an end animation. I'm going to move it up, and I'm just going to move it on up here this way. And there's my animation. Maybe I'll have it stop right there, and that's it. So that's my animation. Just kind of makes this circle. And once again, if I loop it out, I'm going to hold on Option on the stopwatch. That's active. Press Enter, loop, double click on loop out, and it's going to do the same thing. It's just going to, oops, sorry, I didn't want to actually add that in there. I'm just going to press that and just going to keep on looping over and over and over again. And I'm sure we could figure out a better way to play around with that or whatever, but at least we can play around with adding a taper to it. And that's kind of interesting how that works too. Now, another one I did as well, if I bring this back, I actually just made a very simple path just like this. So there's, click on that, click off of everything, make sure. Okay, I'm just going to do something like this. Click and drag like that. And that's it. And now once again, this is just going to be another little simple taper shape. And let's go to stroke, and I'm just going to taper it. Okay. Add my rounds. And that's it. And I can now make a trim path here. Add trim paths. And now I can play with this. And maybe I'll do an end again. So it just kind of starts from nothing and comes up. So I'm going to start there, end, and I'll bring it up all the way to 100. And that's my next little trim path. Something interesting, you can make a little firework kind of idea, something like that. Pretty cool. The next one I want to do is actually kind of showing letters. Now, we've looked at stroke reveal using masks. Now let's try it with a trim path. So let's just call this one firework, just pretend here, just playing around. Now let's do another one where we are using a letter. Now the one I just want to play around with right here really quickly is just the letter W, because it is a continuous shape. It has one stroke, really. So what I can do is just do that. So I zoom in a little bit, and now with a pen tool, I'm just going to cover it with one stroke, one path. So I'm going to click, and remember, this isn't a mask, nothing is selected. I'm just going to click and click. Now this does work in a situation where I actually have the same color background. So I'm going to make sure that this particular stroke is white, so it hides it. And now I think you see what's going to happen here, is I'm just going to add a trim path to this. Add trim path. And look at that, and I'm just going to animate it. Let's try what a start does. Okay, that's what it's going to do, very simply. So let's try one of those. So I'm going to click on start at 0, and I'm going to move this over here and bring it up to 100. And it's just going to kind of reveal the letter. And I'm going to stretch it out so it kind of goes a little bit slower. And there's my trim path. Now I'm having a bit of a glitch there. Oh, maybe that didn't actually go all the way. Yeah, it kind of went to only 92%, and that was my mistake. Let me bring it down, hold shift to snap it in place. There we go. There we go. That's better. But we also see when we don't go to 100% or don't go to 0%, what it does. It can kind of do something interesting depending on what we want to do with it. So now we have a few options here to show you what trim path can do And I said I was going to play around back with this one to see what it does. So let's see what that one does. So I'm going to go back to this one here and add a trim path to it, because right now it's only doing an offset. So if we go back to the dash line, let's add a trim path to it. Add trim paths. So right now it's doing this kind of thing here, which is great. There's my trim paths on this one. And I'm just going to add, let's see what a start does. Let's see what an end does. Okay, so the start, once again, it's just going to make it disappear. Really, that's all it's going to do. But let's add one anyways. Let's maybe do that one there. Let's do an end. Click on end. Bring it over. And subtract it. All the way. Good. Oh, I got to make sure that's at 0 as well. Okay, let's press that. So it's animating and then it just kind of disappears. But let me extend that out a little bit more. So we can also have it offset, and then we can maybe slowly have it disappear on us. So I'm actually going to move that closer over here. So it's animating and then it disappears. So animating and then it disappears. So that we can control that in that regard too. So that's trim path. Hope that helps you kind of maybe create something interesting with the way you can control these paths and have them appear, disappear, and just play around with them in general. Another way we can look at this, let's shut these ones off here. And what I want to do, I kind of want to make like a blast, like it's coming out. So let's see what we can do with the trim path. If we can play around with a line here. So with nothing selected, I'm going to grab my line again. I'm just going to have it kind of in the middle and just kind of out here. Okay, great. There's my path. Okay, so let's see what we can do with the stroke. Let's play around with the stroke. Shape 1, twirl it down, stroke. Obviously it's white, but right now we don't want that, so let's make it a particular kind of blue, maybe a light blue. That's fine. Okay, great. Now let's play with the taper. So, and we could also wave. I'm just going to show you wave. I'm not going to animate wave, but you can. So if you want to wave, you could actually see what it does there. It kind of, let me zoom in a little bit. It kind of allows this interesting, it's almost like a dash, but it adds a curve to it, this wave. So we could play around with the amount of the wave, depending on the size of the stroke width as well. So that's kind of interesting. And we can play around the wavelength, which is, once again, that's animatable. We could do that as well. That's kind of an interesting thing we can do. And phases, let's see what phases do. Okay, we can animate the rotation. So the phase and how many we see and come in. So that's, again, once again, we can animate that, which is pretty cool. But we're not too worried about that right now. What I just want to shut these ones off. Let's just reset that and back to normal. So I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. And what I want to do is I'm going to taper it, but I want to see if I can do a pretty decent taper. There we go. And I'm going to increase the size so that I can play around a little bit, kind of like it's, zooming in and out, and like fireworks, and maybe I'll do a few of them. So I have this one here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a trim path, add trim paths. There's my trim path, bring it down, and I'm just going to have it kind of blast out if I could. Let's try that animation, and I'm just going to do, yeah, that was a start animation. Or I can actually start that way. That can be pretty interesting too. Let's try this one first. Who knows? We could play around and maybe come up with a pretty cool option here. So I'm just going to start at this one to be nothing. No, I'm going to do the end because I see what I want to happen here. And I'm just going to make this work like this. And move that back. Wrong way. There we go. It's going to start at nothing. And then here, hold down shift and snap the CTI to there. Then I'm going to bring it up all the way. So that kind of does that. And now I kind of have like this blast. So potentially I can make a whole background, kind of do something pretty interesting like that. And just by duplicating these. So let me do that. Nothing else is on. Great. I'm just going to duplicate this. And there it is there. And I'm just going to rotate it. I'm going to make sure that the anchor point is actually at the base here. So I'm just going to move it down here. I'm going to hold down, Command, so it snaps to a point, that's exactly where I want it to be. And I'm just going to rotate it. So let's rotate it on that anchor point. So where's my transform? All the way down here. So let's click on that transform and let's rotate it. Maybe to this corner. Okay, so I have that. And now I can play that out. Let's see what that does. Now this one I did shut off, so let's bring that back too. No, I didn't animate it, or I thought I duplicated it. That's okay. Now at least I know what I was doing there. Gotcha. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate it again now. There we go. My anchor point is still there, which is fine. I'm going to move it, rotate it, transform, and I'm going to just drag it over here. Great. There we go. Now I have two. And I'm just going to that's it. Good. Maybe I'm going to duplicate these two again. And once again, I should label them. Maybe that was part of the problem there too. Bring them up, and I'm going to rotate. Let's see if I can rotate both of these at the same time. Yep. And make it hold down command so I go a little bit slower. There we go. Cool. And maybe I'll grab all four of these now. And I just hold down click on the top, hold down shift, or I could command click all of them. And I'm going to command D to duplicate them. And I'm just going to grab the top one and bring it right to the top so I have them all kind of in line there. And I'm going to do the same thing. Let's rotate it. So I'm just going to click on R for rotate, and just because they're all selected, they're all going to rotate at the same time. There I go. And maybe I'll do one more. It doesn't really matter. So you know what? I'm going to do all of them again. And I'm just going to command D. I'm going to drag it down, bring it up, and now they're all at the top there. And once again, I'm just going to press R. I'm going to rotate all of these. Just click and drag that. And there I go. Got some kind of interesting thing happening here. Cool. Kind of making a starburst. I'm going to click off of everything, press U, and again, just to collapse everything. And let's look at the animation. Now, if I wanted to, I could obviously offset them as well. So if I wanted to actually take a look at all my keyframes, and I could actually, move some keyframes for some of them off. I could actually select a lot of these keyframes and move them so it's not as long, or it takes a little bit longer, whatever the case is. And let's see what happens here. Something's happening with this little keyframe over here, by the way. Cool. So we kind of created a pretty interesting starburst, and once again, we could even, if we wanted to, I'm going to click off everything, press U, I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to pre-compose it. So let's do a little pre-compose. Just double check that one. I don't know what happened. Something happened there with one of the extra ones there, the one I just turned off. Let's just delete that one just for the sake of it. That's fine. Good. Okay, so I'm going to select these ones, and I'm going to pre-compose. Right-click, pre-compose. All right, now I have this pre-composition. I should have named it something, but I didn't. That's it, because I had all those layers. Now all those layers are actually in this pre-comp, which that's exactly it right here. I'm going to go back to my main comp, and I'm just going to duplicate this, and let's rotate this. So I'm going to transform this. Let's rotate it a little bit. There we go. And maybe I need to scale it up a little bit. And what else I'll do is potentially I want to change the color of it. So maybe I'll just do an effect, and I'll do a color correction. Okay, and I'll just change up the hue saturation. Click and drag on top of that. And let's just change up the color. Doesn't really matter. There we go. And let's see what this does. Awesome. So once again, if I wanted to, I could kind of time that out a little bit differently. So I'm going to have this appear a little bit later. And then if I wanted to, once again, let's do it one more time. There, and my effect is still on there, so I'm just going to change the effect to a different color on this one, and I'll make it a different color like this, and I'm going to rotate it so it's on a slightly different degree. And because of the way it was cut off, I need to scale it up again as well. So let's scale it, and let's offset it. Great. And there we go. Pretty interesting thing. And once again, if I want to rotate it, do a whole rotation after, let's pretend here. Once it bursts out, here I am. Pretty cool. I can then rotate. Let's rotate these and see what it does. So I'm going to click on all of them and just press R, and let's do a rotation. I select, because they're all selected, I click on one stopwatch, they're all going to change, and then I can just change up the rotation. So let's actually, yeah, I'm going to stay there, and I'm going to move it over, and I'm just going to rotate it, and oh, that's going to be a little bit of an issue, but let's also Shift S will bring up scale as well. Let's also scale them up. Let's just see what that does. This could be pretty interesting. All right, so that's trim path. We created something pretty interesting there, which is fun, but it's all based on having a path and having it visible and then invisible, but the way it animates in is pretty interesting too. So I hope that helps, and you can play around with that quite a bit in After Effects.